Hi, welcome back to the Always Right podcast. I'm author Karisa Delay, and
I'm Jaime Vendera. I'm a little punch drunk. I've been boxing with Mark here, and he's beating me around a little bit. You'll understand why here in a minute. So, all right, hey, it's going to be a fun podcast.
yes, we have a guest today. We have a poet. We spoke in our poetry episode that we had a poet coming, and now we do. We'd like to introduce you to Mr. Mark Connor. Say hello, Mark.
Hello, how are you doing? It's great to be here. Thank you, Chris and Jaime. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yes. All right. So today we're going to talk about Mark. Mark, you have behind you, would you like to tell us the title of your first book?
It's called It's About Time, Millions of Copies Sold for Dad. And so that's
what made you come up with that title, by the way?
So, well, I wrote the book in early 2021 after a year. In early 2021 after just over a year of mourning the death of my father on that was on September 30th of 2019, and I was with my mom, rubbing my rose around my dad's forehead and his chest, and hugging him and crying. We prayed over him, and I was just looking at him, thinking there are things in my life that I always wanted to do and have him see me do. I just need more time. I just need more time. And the two things that I didn't do that I always wanted him to be alive for were to get married and have children, and to have a book published. And we'd even had kind of an argument about that roughly a decade before, because I'm supposed to be a writer, and I had never published a book at that point. I published plenty of articles and so forth, but had never published a book, and was always working on one. So that's how I came up with it. In fact, I opened the book with the line. The first sentence is, I came up. I'll just read that line to you. I came up with the title of this book on September 30, 2019, the day my father died. So that was it. That's the origin of the title.
Wow.
It's nice that you took that time in your life, that sadness, and turned it into something positive.
Yeah.
And created this book because of.
Right. Well, I always kind of fancied myself as this major success, and I think that's a pretty common experience for people that as I've grown in my adult life, there are times when I've realized, and talking to guys, being in my 30s and talking to a guy in his 50s, and I'm thinking to myself, well, that guy just, he's who he is and satisfied with who he is, and then said something to me and made me realize, the big dreams I have, this guy's had big dreams too. Everyone does, and I was just really frustrated, and I felt like a failure, and I felt like, when I actually made the decision. So he died at the end of September 2019, and if you remember what was happening in our country and the world at that time, everything shuts down. And then I live in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I call myself the product of a mixed marriage, because my dad grew up in St. Paul, my mom grew up in Minneapolis. If people who understand the Twin Cities kind of get that as a real joke, but I'm right in the metropolitan area where the riots happened. Then everything, the world was blowing up, and I was mourning my father during this time, and I was really not doing much. But as we came into Christmas of 2020, I said to myself, when this year comes up, I'm going to do something that my father would be satisfied with. And I'm saying, I'm going to finally get this book written and published.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, one of the things
What's just tearing that is. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
No, well, one of the things
that. We got a little latency.
Okay, one of the things that I realized when he was arguing with me, but he even did say this, he says, you're working on a novel and you haven't tried to get that published yet, or I have a play that never did get produced. And he said to me, why don't you just say this book is finished, give it to someone who's going to tell you whether it can be published or not, or just publish something and then just move on to the next thing. So with this, I called it It's About Time, then in parentheses, millions of copies sold for Dad. It's kind of strategic and kind of a sort of humorous to say that, because psychologically you might be implying that millions of copies have sold when someone sees it on a bookshelf, but at the same time, you're saying it's about time that this actually happened, that this is the results that should happen.
Right.
But also, I want this out there and just see what happens, and then I want to move on and write the next thing, and just keep going, and it's a point in my life where, okay, maybe I'm not going to procrastinate like I have for the last couple of decades.
Yeah, so it's almost like your cornerstone of inspiration to keep going and keep pushing. And so now I understand why it's called It's About Time. That makes sense, why you created that title. So one of the things I did have you do was I said, give us some talking points. And I really like your response in this answer. And I'd like for you to tell the audience, for the purpose of the show, is how your background, for those people who don't know, your background as a boxer, how boxing and like being a boxing trainer, has influenced you as a writer.
Right. Okay, so, well, could I share the first poem, and then that kind of leads into it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because, yeah, you can do that.
Okay, so the first poem is called The Perfect Metaphor, right? The perfect metaphor to describe boxing is jazz. There's a rhythm to every fight. I learned this from Dennis Presley, who learned it from Rock White. A fighter has a rhythm, and the only way to beat him is for you to break it and establish your own. That's where improvisation begins. No one knows where it will lead or where it will end. Jazz is the perfect metaphor to describe boxing. Every fight has its rhythm upon which is added improvisation. I learned that from Dennis Presley, who learned it from Rock White, who practiced collaboration with Emma Guinness and Bobby Zamora, the two men who taught me to fight. So
here's me. I read this poem this morning because you put that in your answers. And when I was reading it, I was trying to the rhythm. It's nice to hear you say it because I could hear your rhythm. I could hear where you enunciated certain sounds of the stanza of your poems. Thank you for that.
Well, I love that it's kind of like it's a memoir too, in a sense, So you read it and it's giving meaning and pulling from your life.
Yeah, go ahead. You gonna ask me a question, or?
No, I was just gonna say this explains the question of how your boxing and your experience in boxing has affected you as a writer, creating writing, because your writing obviously has a lot to do with boxing, but it also has a lot to do with just the movement. I'm hearing the movement in your words, almost like you're a movement in the way you would move around the boxing ring.
Right. Yeah. That's the thing. So one, the discipline of boxing and the regimental structure of my day and my life as a boxer is something that, there's a rhythm to that. From the time I get to bed, get up in the morning. So I've got a regimentation of how I live my life when I was as a boxer, and I try to teach that to people that I'll teach how to box, because you got to do your running, because that's a base for everything, and then you've got the different apparatuses that you work on, from shadow boxing, hitting heavy bag, whatever. You get a regimentation or a regularity in your life where you're doing that all the time. So that's what's honing your skill. And then there's a rhythm to doing it. It's a form of dance. It's a form of performance. So it's always that give and take and everything. So then when it comes to writing, there's that same kind of ritualistic regimentation in doing it all the time. And also there's this musicality to language. So when I'm talking to you, a lot of times, and I don't know, some people are visual people, some people are I don't know what's the other word, but they're not really visual people. But I have always seen when people talk, right? Then I can see, sometimes I can see words when I'm speaking them. For both activities, boxing and writing, when I'm in the midst of them, it's almost as if I lose consciousness. I don't really lose consciousness, but I get so much into people call it getting into the zone, whatever. That's
You just took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah.
You get
So
in that mental headspace.
Yeah, Mark,
right,
I'll be writing a book when I'm in that space and dancing with the words. I mean, it could be 5 hours past, and I was like, I've only been writing 30 minutes. How in the world is it in the afternoon?
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah,
So I like this. I like this comparison. I like this comparison that Mark is giving, that writing, whether you're writing poetry or you're writing your fiction or nonfiction, when you're writing, it is like boxing, because you're coming in and out of that high of, I'm on fire with this writing. I'm in the offense part of it, but then you get in the defense mode when you're like, okay,
writer's block.
I need something to counteract what I just wrote, or add what am I going to bring to the ring. So yeah, that's a great analogy and comparison, parallel to writing.
yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
Right.
I was reading your one Ever Since. I was reading that one this morning. That one's cute, but it has some underlying emotion in that one.
Yeah. Well, it was frustration at that point. Later on in the story, I talk about kind of reforming myself. I come from a Catholic background. I never fully abandoned my faith as a Catholic, but I was kind of at a point where I was really kind of leaning towards what I followed in terms of my personal faith and then Christianity. And sometime between 2003 and 2007, I really re-embraced my Catholic Christianity. My niece was born in 2006, and I dedicate the book to her and to her big brother Liam. And I think I didn't consciously think of it at the time, but I think a part of it was because I'm a godfather to a girl. My responsibility is to model the faith for her. And at that point in time, when I was writing that, when I wrote that particular poem, that was it was to a young woman who had approached me and gone out with me, and everything broke up. It broke up kind of fast. Like I said, I've never gotten married and never had kids. And so that's something that really kind of haunts me. I'm kind of feel like I've got this race against time. And so that poem, I had this vision of something happening with her that could be a future, and it wasn't. And so that's where that came. And then I say right after that, there was this, I think it was in June of 2017. Yeah, it broke a 2-year I mean, without looking at
I said writer's block earlier, Karisa. I didn't think you caught it. I was trying to be nice to you. We have an ongoing joke. I don't believe in writer's block.
I wanted to make sure we cover as much as possible.
Yeah, okay.
For your book, and the struggles, the ups, the downs. One thing I do want to know was, what was your biggest struggle with writing? Besides starting, once you started doing it, what was your biggest struggle? Was it the writing process? Was it the editing process?
Was it getting regimented like you talked about with boxing? I mean,
So
what was
So for this particular book, or for just in general, for my writing challenge?
For this book.
Okay, so for this book.
For this book, getting this book to fruition, what has been your biggest struggle?
The biggest struggle was the logistics of having the time to sit down and make sure it's finally edited and then ready for publication, and also finding how I was going to do it. So on the jacket quotes, there are two guys. There's Danny Klecko and Dan Flynn. Both of them are published authors. Dan Flynn, I list as my literary advisor. He was telling me that the standards I was sticking to were good, and that I made the right decision. But I had a small publisher who was going to publish it. We're going to try to get it published in the summer of 2022. So what happened was, this publisher that I had, the small publisher, didn't want to use an outside editor, and we ended up not signing the contract until October of 2022. And then I'd work when I had to work, but I was spending all day just doing the revisions and everything. So then she's only communicating me via email after we signed the contract, not returning my calls, and keeps doing these edits that I don't like. And I just didn't agree with it. I felt they're taking away my voice. The line spacing in there. So we end up officially on Christmas Eve that this contract was severed. It had to rest a little bit. So January goes by, February goes by. We're come towards the end of March, and I'm saying, okay, I'm gonna get it together. I'm gonna do everything I can to publish this book. My mother has this decline, and she ends up in the hospital. I'm taking care of my mom. And that summer, she said, "Get on it, get to it, get it done, everything." And finally, I talked to Dan Flynn about it, and he said, basically, you're gonna have to find a way of publishing this yourself. And so I formed Connemara Patch Press. I got a lot of help. Tony Zernhout, he owns a direct mail marketing company, and they've got a printer and everything. And he said, "Look, man, I will print these for you. I'll print the marketing copies for you." And this lawyer, Kelly Rowe, he did all the paperwork for me and everything. So I feel like I had a publisher. I kind of had this psychological thing. I'm not going to self-publish. I'm going to find it right. I had a really good contract. Whereas we're going to do 50-50 royalties. So, but then I still have to do all the marketing myself anyway with that publisher. And so now, I've been really lucky.
Well, that's general.
Yeah, that's typically, I mean, if they're doing 50-50, that's probably one of those hybrid publishers. It's probably not a traditional sense in the way they're doing, especially you said that they weren't allowing you to use an outside source for editing. And that's part of the whole 50-50 is they're using their people. So I don't want to, and I'm not going to name the publisher, but I don't want to denigrate the publisher either, because this is a woman who actually has helped me and who actually is very accomplished, and she's had a lot of sales with other authors and with her own work, and she's pretty excellent. But we just clashed on this one thing. So sometimes you can have really good business and or personal relationships with people, but you get on one project and it's just not the project that you're meant to work on together. Well, if it makes you feel any better, when Jaime and I first met, I turned him down too.
See, hey, same thing. My first book, it took me 4 years to write, and I sought out publisher after publisher. Nobody was interested, so I self-published, and it grew much bigger. Ran into the same issues. My first fiction book, we hired an editor, and he butchered it, but in a good way. But I was mad. I mean, he took out like 15,000 words or something. I was going to kill this guy. But in my situation, it was elegant. There are situations like you're talking, if they change your voice, then I understand. It's good that you stuck to your guns. And I mean, self-publishing is, a lot of people are making a living doing that, with Kindle, KDP. So, that was probably the right choice for you.
Mark, do you ever go to book signings or things where they have at the library or local events where they may invite authors to set up a booth where you can sell your books? I've done that a few times since publishing this. So this book actually won a literary award. It won the Irish Network Minnesota annual Bloomsday Award in June. For those listening, cool. So for those listening who don't know what Bloomsday is the day in 1905, June 16, 1905, that Leopold Bloom, his story takes place in the novel Ulysses by James Joyce. So it's a James Joyce Literary Award. Tim Nolan, the nationally known poet, was the judge for that, and it was really very. Was it Tom Nolan? I'm sorry. Forgive me, but he gave me such a. It was really flattering to hear what he said when he made the announcement for the award. So that gave me kind of a good shot, kind of coming out of the gate. Kind of gave me a good boost. But then we had a sort of a launch party in September at this local Irish bar that's mentioned one time in the book, called the Dubliner Pub in St. Paul, and Element Boxing Gym where I train boxers. It just merged with the YWCA in St. Paul, and they had this kind of open house thing. So I was there signing books and selling books. I'm trying to remember. There have been a couple of other places, but a lot of them I've just sold. I carry it around with me. I was just sold directly to people, and I signed them. Yeah, that's a great idea.
there's a store
Well,
called.
I got a question for you then. If you've done that and you're selling them, and I meet you on the street, and I'm like, you know how people are today. They're into TikTok. They're like, I ain't got time to stop. They're going to go. But you stop me, and you got 30 seconds to convince me to buy this book and tell me what it's about. How would you get me to, what would you say about your book?
I would say it's a saga wrapped around a package of poems guarded by angels, and it's and it's written to deal with the death of my father. It talks about my Catholic faith. It talks about my time in the Native American Indian community, and it also it ends with making my final conclusions.
I absolutely love the fact that, you know, you wanted to be an author this whole time and you finally did it. And I know the podcast is almost over. So if for our listeners who are like, man, I want to write a book, I've been thinking about this for decades. You did it. What advice would you offer them to get up off their butt, to get into that jazz flow and write this book?
Write, pardon my language, but write shit. And the reason I say write shit is because I mentioned the book Writing Down the Bones in this book. And that's a book by Natalie Goldberg that was really helpful, especially in terms of writing poetry, is really helpful to me. But writing anything, it helps you get the flow of writing going. I mean, it's exercises that help you actually get into the habit of writing. And when she said write shit, because everyone does that. Everyone writes stuff that's going to hit the floor, you throw it in the wastebasket or you delete it, and you write it over and over again. Every great writer has, you're not going to read, you might read, if you're lucky, 10% of what the greatest writer who's ever been published writes, even if you read all of that person's collected published works, because you only read what they've made perfect or close to perfect, because everything else is, it's all been revised, they've thrown it away. So that's what you have to do. You have to realize, no matter how terrible it sounds, whatever, that everyone writes stuff like that, and the greatest writers you know have written stuff that they'd be embarrassed if you ever got a hold of it. So just write and just keep doing it.
That's excellent advice, because think of how many authors don't write because of that.
Right.
Because they're afraid.
Right, and one more thing. I started this Substack that I've hardly done anything on, but it's there. And what I've done have been real long articles. But I say in the opening article, I say, you know, this is an endeavor of my, you know, my big dreams and colossal failures. It's like at one point I said, you know, I'm worried about what people think I'm saying, as if no one reads it, everyone's gonna, like, if no one reads it, what am I so embarrassed about? No one read it. It's not like, it's like, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, so if no one reads the book, then I'm not a big failure to the whole world, because the whole world hasn't read it and said, well, that's terrible work. It's just, you know, so what am I worried about the judgment for, is what I'm saying. You know, that's the deal.
So, right. Website. Do you have a website? How can people find you? So
BoxersAndWritersMagazine.com. And if you put a /books, you'll go right to my book page. But if you go just BoxersAndWritersMagazine.com, the front page gives you can click on the books page. That gives you the chance to get it from Amazon or Lulu, Lulu, Lulu. And if you're in St.
I saw it was on Lulu, and then.
If you're in St. Paul, Minnesota, go to Irish on Grand, because it's there. That's the one physical place you can buy it now. Okay. Hopefully, I'm going to get it in other places. You can ask for it anywhere. It's on that Ingram distribution thing. So if you ask for it at a bookstore, they'll order it for you. But the easiest thing to do is go to BoxersAndWritersMagazine.com/books. Click onto the books page, and it gives you the options to buy it. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you, Mark, for coming onto the show and sharing your inspirational story of how you went from boxing to becoming a writer. And I'm really hoping for a lot of success with your book, and that you can continue to write, and that you'll continue to use your life as a way to inspire you to keep writing. Thank you very much for coming on. But for those listeners, if you want to find Mark, like you had said, if you go to
BoxersAndWritersMagazine.com. So just all spelled out.
BoxersAndWritersMagazine.com.
I forget our own website. I was going to say BoxersAndWriters.com. See, I would have messed it up.
We'll put that in the show notes for you. I'm sorry? No, okay. No, so I will put all that information. I will put.
I think we have a latency issue is what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Oh,
it'll
the
happen.
sound, right,
It's like
right.
we're both going into the ring at the same time trying to take
Yeah.
swings.
Well, okay, what were you saying, Mark?
Well, I was going to say, if you somehow can't find the website, if you type in Mark Connor, Boxers and Writers Magazine, that will come up too. But I just go boxersandwritersmagazine.com/books, you know.
Perfect.
And if you're wanting to see it on Kindle, you can go to Amazon, but make sure you put Mark Connor in there and then put the title of the book, It's About Time, Millions of Copies Sold for Dad, and you can find that book easily as a really cool abstract photo for the front cover. Let me show you this just so you can see it if you're watching YouTube. It looks like this.
That's great.
Yeah,
A lot of overlapping images there with the Catholic, Irish, the boxing and stuff. Find out.
That's a Native American Indian artist named Eric Keast. He's up in Ontario, Canada. He's just a brilliant artist. So anyway, plug for my buddy.
Nice.
Nice. Very cool. All right. So thank you again for listening. If you would like to find us, you can go to alwayswritepodcast.com. You can click on our icons. You can follow us on all of our social media. You can go to YouTube and hit that subscribe button, and you can watch other episodes that we put out. If you'd like to email us, or you know an author that maybe wants to come on, or if you have information to share, or you just have something you want nice to say, you can email us.
Like, you want to know how much water I drink a day? Oh, they already know that.
If you would like to know how much water Jamie drinks a day. If you'd like to contact us by email, you can go to alwayswritepodcast@gmail.com. And we'll make sure that Jamie doesn't check that because he always.
Yeah. Did it come up as unread? That's what I did with yours, Mark. I checked it from my other email account, but Mark's reaching out. Nope. Yeah, it looks as it's been read.
Here I am trying to make sure I'm going back and forth with our guests, and Jamie's checking. I'm like, I didn't see that email because Jamie already opened it.
Crystal will check that.
Right. So anyways, as I was saying, we can literally be found all formats, and you can reach out to us at our email, and you can listen to us and give us some shout outs, whatever you want to do. Anyways, all right. As always, this has been a great episode with another amazing author, not artist, but it is an artist, writing artist. Yes.
A poet.
Poet, and I didn't even know it. All right. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Have a great weekend, and guys, until the next episode. Say it again.
All right. Yeah, blessings. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
All right. Yes. Thank you, Mark, and thanks for listening, everyone. Until next time, always write.